You got to wear your collar with dignity. How it was.
Look is beautiful.
I said, sing it along.
Look is beautiful.
Say, I'm black and proud. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality.
For all the murderers, a lament of the dead. For a ounce of cocaine or some marijuana, you killed your friend Claude. For leaving his terrain and crossing to Mova, you spilled Richard's blood. An ex-drug dealer you attacked because he sell you some bad crack. So you hide in the dark and commit a brutal act. That's a fact. On your URP job you want double pay for doing nothing. The poor man say no, so you blow up the head to win ratings. But murderer you committing, besides murder a greater sin. For the things you preventing that dead man from seeing. Yes, for just because of your stupidity, that dead man didn't see Latapi weaving his magic amongst them Yankee when we gave them tree. And just because of your damn foolishness, those you kill will forever miss Thompson winning silver in the Olympics. And just because of your damn ignorance, that man didn't see Usain Bolt dance when he broke the world record with arrogance. But your greatest sin, Mr. Killer, is that you prevented our black brother from seeing this century's greatest history drama. Because of you, many see the tears of Oprah. You stop men from seeing Barack Obama. Just because your girlfriend talked to another man, you blew out his brains. And because Mr. Ken disagree with your plans, you slew him like Cain. And next man you attacked because you didn't like his act. So you hide in the trap and commit that brutal act. That's a fact. One of your boys was killed while walking on George Street, just so one night. So you walk in the area and blow up two of them, boom, boom, first fight. It's a pity you cannot see that beyond your murderous spree, the folks you kill will never see momentous history. Yes. For just because of your damn stupidness, those you killed didn't get to witness all those men who ran in the New York's business. And just because of your Foolish action the dead didn't see. Jesse Jackson weep and cry for the rise of the African. Ah, and because of that gun you were carrying, dead men didn't see Black Stalin get his doctorate from UE for doing his thing. You make men see Michelle Obama through the front of the White House enter, not as a maid, but as First Lady, brother. Uh-huh. Because of you, men see history register. Uh-huh. You stop men from seeing Barack Obama. Alive. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do that. Uh-huh. Whoa. Whoa. Uh-huh. Just a few years ago, Africans were murdered like dogs in the States. Many were killed just so for some lie, Lord forbid, that whites fabricate. Trying to vote made whites upset. So many blacks were burned to death. And whilst they were burning, the Ku Klux Klan danced and fed. Oh yes, was the whip and them dogs when Africans demanded their human rights. Was the jail and curtail for trying to speak to whites polite. So look here, Mr. Murderer, men have died to see what you saw. In their time, blacks couldn't pass through the White House back door. For just because of your damn idleness, those you killed didn't get to witness. Africans in the U.S. voting, where once they were killed for this. And because of that gun, my brother, those you killed will never see Ganga, and his voice win a million in Antigua. Uh-huh. And because of your criminal doing, that men get to see Hillary Clinton serving as Secretary of State to a black skin. You make men see Michelle Obama dressed so beautiful last winter at State Hall where her grandma couldn't enter. Uh-huh. Because of your gun, men see the tears of Oprah. Uh-huh. You stop men from seeing Barack Obama alive. Uh-huh. Oh. Uh-huh.
And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101. I am telling you, I do not think that there is any more creative music in the world than Calypso, the mother music of our Caribbean. Listen to that Calypsonian, weaving black and black crime while celebrating Obama. And if he celebrates Obama, he's celebrating black womanhood. Michelle Obama dressed so nicely. Black women are beautiful. It's a well-crafted calypso, talking about crime in our community, but linking that crime to our history. There was once a time when blacks couldn't vote, and bringing it to the present, a calypso about Obama, but he doesn't say much about Obama. He talks about the tears of Oprah, the tears of Jesse Jackson. Here is a West Indian celebrating a black man from America, the Pan-Africanism in the calypso. No other music in the world can do that, weaving together themes that make us think about our condition. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101 on a Friday evening. Of course, tonight is Black Matters. Black Matters, Black people, business. Welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link and let everyone know that we're on a Friday night. On a Friday night. On Black Matters. The mighty Chogdos lament of the dead. The mother music of our Caribbean. Our gift to the world. Our mind. That's what we Guyanese and Caribbean people give to the world. Our mind.
One more time, let's go there. Swing it out, boys. Oh, oh, oh. Well, they drop a hydrogen bomb in PG. Lord of mercy, they drop a hydrogen bomb in PG. Lord of mercy, riot in tongue, mama. I hear the whole place on fire, from Kitty to the waterfront, all that, bun down flat, flat, flat. I ain't care if all a beachy bun down. I ain't care if the whole a bookers bun down. But they'll be putting me out my way if they tackle Tiger Bay and bun down me hotel where all them robbing the stay. They lock up over 1,000 people. Well, that was trouble. They sent for policemen in the country to bring unity, but police are all afraid. Stand up and they watch in stores get raid. Walk in the store, take everything, and when you done, set fire to the building. But I ain't care if the whole of BG burned down. I ain't care if all the bookers burned down. But they'll be putting me out my way if they tackle Tiger Bay and burn down me hotel where all me wabbing the stay. A woman walking a store on Main Street, slippers on she feet, dirty petticoat, long time straw hat, and she smelling worse than that, but she walk out like a lady. High heels, glasses, jewelry. The straw hat she had on wearing before. She take match and she bun it inside the store. I don't care if the whole of BG bun down. I ain't care if all the bookers bun down. But they'll be putting me out my way if they tackle Tiger Bay. And bun down me hotel, we all know I've been the stay. Sweet shots, Paso. Let's go, Daddy. Ayeha. Oh, 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 oh. They send for soldiers quite up in England. With big confusion, they bring down warships with cannon like peas to shoot Guyanese. But Burnham say, all right now, I'm the only man to stop this row. He give me the signal, and that's the case. Now we have peace and quiet in the place. But I ain't care if the whole of beach is burned down. I didn't care if all the bookers burned down. They'll be putting me out my way only if they tackle Tiger Bay. And burn down me hotel with all me what in the stay.
Hey, that's what we call historical memory in cultural studies. Yes, the Mighty Sparrow is singing there about our ethnic and racial violence in the 60s. That's what he's singing there about. But he uses the moment to humanize Tiger Bay, which is, of course, back then and up to now, is still the bad part of Georgetown. But here is the Calypsonian saying, I don't care if Booker's Bondong, I don't care, so long as you all don't touch Tiger Bay. What he's doing there is humanizing those poor people of Tiger Bay. And that's where Sparrow used to stay. Back in the 60s, when the Calypso season was finished in Trinidad, the Calypsonians used to come to Guyana. And Sparrow used to stay in Tiger Bay. So he's using the incident of the riots to talk about the smarts of poor people. The lady in the straw hat, she come out with her glasses and she burned the straw hat in the store. The Calypso is humanizing poor people who are usually seen. He said, I ain't care about bookers. That's rich people's story. So long as poor people are not decimated. He talks about the Wabin, Jean and Dinah, our Jean and Dinah, taking prostitution and giving it a human face. That is why that music, Calypso music, is the most powerful music in the world. And it could only come from people like us, telling stories. He said, they drop a hydrogen bomb in BG. Hydrogen bomb. That's how he describes the violence of the 60s. A hydrogen bomb, he called it. And then, of course, he ends the song. He ends the Calypso. They say they send all kind of warship from England. But Burnham said, I is the man, stop it. Showing the power of the political leader. I know we have other musics that we listen to. They're all great music. The jazz and the blues from America. our native music from Africa, our own reggae, which itself comes out of calypso, hip hop, which comes out of reggae. There's a linkage among and between our musics, but this modern music, which was developed on the slave plantation, is the music that tells our stories. You don't have to go and read a book on the 60s. Just listen to Sparrow there. He give you the riot. He give you the politics. He give you poor people in their habitat. Good evening and welcome to Black Matters, our gift to the world, our musics, calypso, reggae, the blues, jazz, hip hop, merengue. We're a musical people and we have to be a musical people. If music is that thing that allows us to express ourselves in ways that the oppressor cannot find us, we are the original. Somebody asked me a question a couple of weeks ago in the chat. Why has Guyana not developed a kind of music industry like Trinidad and Jamaica? And the simple answer to that is that our governments over the years have not seen it fit to invest in the music industry. Burnham invested in culture, but it didn't go beyond that. I understand later on, Eddie Grant wanted to open his recording studio here and he got a lot of pushback. And so he went to Barbados and opened a studio, Ice Records, and did some wonderful recording during that period. I think a lot of it has to do with our political environment. You see, the Calypsonian cusses out the politician. Can you imagine our Calypsonians today cussing out Irfan Ali? They will duck low. They want to win. And that is why our brother, who we celebrated here a couple of weeks ago, is so important, the Mighty Rebel. He was a political Calypsonian, and he brought second for a long time. You see, our Calypsonians, I expect our Calypsonians to take something like One Guyana and open it and critique it. But our Calypsonians come from our society. And what they sing about is what they feel in the society. Trinidad, the Calypsonian cuff left, right, and center. The abuser of Eric Williams, they call it Deafy. And Chagdos, who we saw earlier, used to criticize Eric Williams, and Eric Williams said, let the jackass bray. You know? The society in Trinidad and Jamaica, those societies have been more open to the creativity of the people. And I'm not saying that they don't get involved in politics, because Pandey wanted to ban Calypso. And there were several Calypsos that were banned during Pandey's period of rule in Trinidad. He didn't want to ban Calypso. He banned some Calypsos. So our ethnic problem is also because the Calypso is an African art form and deals with question of ethnicity and race. But it enriches the society. It enriches the society. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101, just so the old timers there. I ain't care if BG bun down. I ain't care what they do on Main Street and what they do um, the Bookers, and the music captures that. He said the violence starts from Kitty to the waterfront. See, the Calypsonian observes the society when he goes there, so he knows Main Street and the waterfront and Kitty and so on. And he's not Guyanese. Of course, some old timers like me remember BG Plantin, another Sparrow classic on Guyana. When Trinidad banned Guyana Plantin from going in to Trinidad. And Sparrow said, Dr. Williams, you're causing trouble in the country. Them women gonna rise up against you. You banning BG Plantin. The double attage of the Calypsonian. BG Plantin, another of Sparrow's classic on Guyana. BG, British Guyana. In the old days, everybody came here. They came from the islands, that Linden, a lot of Vincentians and St. Lucians and Grenadians. And of course, we all know in the village, you always know where an islander live, breadfruit tree. We had the Polydors in our village, Buxton. So Polydor, I think, came from Grenada. Azzy Brave Boy came from Grenada. Mozam came from Jamaica. And you could always know where these people live. Always, they had a breadfruit tree. And Linden knows that more. Everybody came here. Mahdia is really St. Lucia. St. Lucians came to Mahdia and settled there. A lot of them are now going back to find their families in St. Lucia because a lot of them came looking for gold and to work in the bauxite industry and so forth. It's the mixing, the rubbing up of our Caribbean. Our Caribbean. Sparrow himself was born in Grenada. And when they get him vexed once, he take down his pants and skinny beat up on them. Because I tell you, he's a mannish Grenadian. Oh boy. Welcome. Last night we were talking about regime change. And we got a lot of feedback on that discussion last night about regime change, because it is very important in understanding where we are today. And the point I was trying to make is that there were forces in Guyana leading up to the election that had their own agendas. And that those agendas came together at some point, because that's how regime change works. Oil was coming, and so the Indian and Portuguese business class, and to some extent the Chinese, their agenda was how to capture control of the local oil industry and the wealth that will flow for that. That was their concern. That was their agenda. The Indian, Portuguese, and Chinese business class. So they had their agenda, and they're asking, is the coalition the government that is going to allow them free rein to get their hands on that oil wealth? And at some point, they concluded that the PPP was better. We know why now. Then you had the Indian masses. How to get the Indian masses on board. And that's where now race came in. So there was the race agenda. Because remember, some Indians had voted for the AFC to bring the coalition to power. And the PPP was intent to crush that. And then what you do in those circumstances is you feed people the dose of race. Your enemies are Africans. You don't have to say that. Americans call it dog whistle. And in some regard, the coalition may have played into their hands in trying to right-size the sugar industry. They did the right thing economically, but what they didn't realize was that there were racial consequences. And the PPP was able to use the workers that became redundant at Gaisuko to use that in a racial way. Use it against the coalition. But because the coalition itself did not think that race was important, it didn't realize how something good can be used against it. And the PPP pounded that these black people in power want to weaken Indians by taking away their jobs. So there was the Indian workers' agenda, the Indian, Portuguese, and Chinese agenda for oil, and then the PPP as a party had its own axe to grind with the PNC. And so you had the partisan political agenda. Then you had the overseas Indian money people. The overseas Indian money people. They also wanted to get into the oil business. And so they had their own agenda. They felt it was naturally the PPP is the better option. And so they poured money. As we now know, you're talking about literally tens of millions of American money. They poured money into lobbying the Americans. So you have to understand, Ramotar did not concede the 2015 election. He said they were rigged and the Americans were on the side of the coalition. Never conceded. And it's obvious that they said that, look, if the Americans help the coalition, then we have to get the Americans to help we. And the money from Queens and maybe Toronto and other places, well, that money was important in lobbying the Americans. You see, American government has various entry points. You have the entry point at the top with the federal government, but you have state government, you have city government. There are various points of entry. If you lobby a congressperson or a senator, he or she sits on very important committees and subcommittees that make the law. And the PPP was very, very alert to that. And that Indian bourgeoisie in New York and Toronto poured their money into lobbying the American government. They didn't go just to the top and lobby Trump. They lobby from the bottom. So they had their own interests. And then, of course, oil is found. And you have American and British companies who have their interest in Guyana oil. Clive Thomas said a long time ago, there is more oil down there. Exxon didn't tell us how much oil that was down there, and our people bought into the Exxon prediction. Clive Thomas said there was much more oil, and he's now proven correct. If they tell us how much oil is down there, then that would have given us leverage to bargain with them. So the oil companies had their interests. And if you know how American multinational corporations operate, that they go through their governments. That is what Dwight Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. The way in which the military and the government and the multinational corporations are weaved together. So it's obvious that those oil companies lobby their own government to look after their interests in Guyana. So you have foreign interests with their agenda. You had foreign Guyanese of Indian extraction with their agenda. You have the local business class, Portuguese, Chinese, Indians with their agenda. And then you have the PPP with their political agenda. Their agenda is to capture power. At what point all those agendas came together, I can't say. We are never going to know that in the short run. But at some point, they came together. All of those interests came together at some point. Jerry Govaya said on Freddie Kissoon's program that they were in touch with the Americans. And the first set of sanctions, they were called in. And that the Americans were going to go for a second set of sanctions. They called them and told them. So you had local interests in touch with foreign interests. As I said, at some point, all those interests came together. The PPP also lobbied CARICOM, the OAS, and the Commonwealth. The PPP never liked CARICOM, but there were some leaders who were close to the PPP. Dr. Ralph Gonzalez has always been closer to the PPP. And they would have used him as the entree to CARICOM. And so you had now CARICOM, the OAS, and Commonwealth. They didn't have an agenda, but as developing countries in CARICOM and the OAS and so on, America wields a lot of influence in those organizations, and Britain wields a lot of influence in Commonwealth. So Britain was able to use the Commonwealth to advance its interests in Guyana. And the Americans obviously used OAS and CARICOM. And so at some point, all those interests came together, and that's the regime change. I said last night that the coalition didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue what was going on. And that, for me, anyhow, as I said, I am not, this series is not to critique the coalition government, but they didn't have a clue. If they had a clue what was going on, they would have acted differently. I know we beat up on Charan Das because the Charan Das issue was the first time I think the coalition government had an inkling what was going on. It was a coalition government. It included different parties, different ethnic groups. And the forces who were trying to remove the government will go to its weakest link. And the weakest link, they figured out, wrongly or rightly, were the Indian brothers and sisters in the AFC. Maybe in the PNC too, because I heard some names were being called. By the time the coalition got to realize what was going on, they couldn't figure out who it was. But if you're in a coalition, you have to govern differently. And I think President Granger and those around him made a mistake in the way they managed the coalition. They managed the coalition badly. That is why the people were able to penetrate the coalition and get one. I understand there were others standing by. The same thing as I said with the Gaisuko thing. The commission of inquiry tell them, do not close their estates. My comrade, Brother Clive Thomas, advised them. He was the chairman of the board. He advised them, do not close their estates. So in some regards, the coalition government played into the hands of a plot that it wasn't aware of. At some point, all of those interests came together. And as I said last night, it was the Secretary of State of the United States. You know what you're talking about there? As I said last night, the Secretary of State is the fourth in command. The Secretary of State doesn't get involved in those kinds of things so easily. The last time prior to that was when the Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, went to Jamaica to instruct Michael Manley to stop being friends with Castro and to stop allowing their country to be used as a refueling point to send troops to Angola and Mozambique. And the Jamaicans under Manley had introduced, I think, a 7% levy. They said, you know, all our bauxite that you're taking away, give us 7 cents before the bauxite leave, and you can take the 93 cents and go. And the Americans didn't like that. And so Kissinger went to Jamaica. He was staying in Montego Bay and told Manley that Manley must go down to Montego Bay, the hotel he was staying, to meet with him. And of course, Manley and the people in the PNP said, you come to our country, you come to State House and meet with the Prime Minister. And Manley made the famous statement, we are a small country, but we are not going to crawl on our knees. The rest is history, because the Americans punished Jamaica, punished Manley. Manley was hounded from power via election. It is the most violent election Jamaica's ever had. Over 500 people were killed, including old people and so on in nursing homes. So they used the elect, but what they did was to create the conditions of ungovernability. And so there was no way Manley could have won that election. That was the last regime change in our English-speaking Caribbean until 2020, where the election was used to change a regime. The election itself became a coup. As I said last night, election became democracy. Those fellas were sitting on the road. They called themselves guardians of democracy. We later would find out that what they were guarding in those containers were contaminated votes. So the election was not a means to elect people democratically. It was a means to get rid of one party or group of parties and to install another group that is palatable to the interests. You wonder why there are people now who are angry with the PPP for not renewing the contract. The PPP lied to them to get them to be part of the plan, the regime change. And they're angry at the PPP for not delivering I'm not saying that those who are campaigning for a good contract that they're wrong. I'm not saying they're right. I mean, a better contract would be good for us. But a lot of those persons went along with regime change. And they were lied to. They were lied to. The PPP assured them that it will look after their interests. And they've become collateral damage because the PPP has bigger fishes to hold its promise to. It has to hold its promise to Exxon and Hess and the ABC countries. It had to make a choice. Am I going to hold my promise to these fellas in Guyana? Or am I going to hold my promise to the big dog? And that's why the oil lobby has been thrown under the bus. A government doesn't put its integrity on the line by appealing against its own court. Even a stupid government doesn't do that. So the PPP is doing that because the stakes are high. If the PPP reneges on its promise to the oil companies, the coalition in play, the PNC in play, because those people have what is called permanent interests, not permanent allies. And if the PPP walks back on its promise, they will go to other forces. And the PPP understands that. So those elections became a site of regime change. We cannot know who won that election. We cannot know. Because it was an election that was fixed. And one of the things about regime change in a place like Guyana, you fix an election, you fix it close. If they had given the PPP a 4-seat majority, everybody would have known that no. So they did it close. And what was important, a not important factor, were these little parties that spring up, which we now know weren't parties. These were groups of people who were getting money from the Canadians and the British and the Americans and so on. And they know that Guyanese people like new parties. And enough of them voted for these new parties. And they got a seat. It was well orchestrated. And as I said, it was difficult, you know, in some credit to the coalition. It's difficult when something of that magnitude is happening. But you're a government of a country, you should have intelligence. I think it was Brother Winston Jordan who said the coalition did not even attempt to buy a parliamentarian from the PPP side. It had government, it had money, but it didn't even attempt to buy. And the other side was buying from them. It's a lesson for us. And what I'm doing here is giving you preliminary thoughts. There's a wonderful article written by a young lady, a professor from the United States of America, on how regime change happens. And I've read that article about 3 or 4 times. It fits what happened in Guyana in 2020. Some of you think that the court lined up with the PPP. No, the PPP took advantage of the conservative nature of the courts. I don't believe that Roxanne George is PPP in the sense that she would put her integrity for the PPP in power. If that were so, the PPP would have already made her Chief Justice. They're not interested in her. What they're interested in is the conservative nature of her ruling. You see the cat among the pigeons? The judge that stepped out of the conservative mold and made that ruling in this case with Exxon and the insurance. The PPP is angry at her, at that judge. Indian Guyanese, how dare you? But these are the contradictions in society. These are the contradictions in society. Not for one moment I believe that those judges were partisan. I never believed it. But their conservative rulings were fodder to the regime changers. Look at the recount order. I heard Jack Dio the other night said Vincent Alexander put a lot of things in the recount order and blah, 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 blah. It is true. The recount order was supposed to be an audit, not a count. But once they got the recount order and the recount started and the trickery was coming out, the chairman said, put them aside. After 2 days, she said, put them all back. I am sure she was under tremendous pressure from all those forces that I told you about. The business elements, the political elements, the foreign elements. I am not defending her, but I'm saying we have to understand. And the same thing with the courts. Never before have our courts been under the spotlight. So we had the neat regime change. As I said last night, it is not often that America puts sanctions on a party before the election is over. In Venezuela, everybody knew they were back in the opposition against Maduro, but they wait until after the election to put sanctions on Maduro. But they put sanctions on the coalition government before the election was over. And so therefore, they influenced the outcome of the elections. You all are gone to one participant head. You're influencing the outcome. No, am I cussing out the Americans? No. I'm saying the Americans look after their interests. That's nothing new for America or Britain or France or any of these big countries. They look after their interests and the interests of their economic corporations, their multinational corporations. They do that all the time. They had their interests. And they were able to mesh their interests with local interests and regional interests. And put the might of the US state put the might of the US state through its Secretary of State. You can't get more, you can't get mightier than that. When Jimmy Carter traveled around the world, he's traveling with the protection of the American state. But I've never heard, well, except in Guyana, Hamilton Green believes to this day that Jimmy Carter had to fix the 92 election. But this is not Jimmy Carter. This is the Secretary of State. Why should we know and go back to this regime change? Because what we are experiencing now is a consequence of that regime change. All of our politics, boots on the ground we call for. And there are no boots on the ground, and we cuss North, and we cuss this body, and we cuss that body. But in the aftermath of regime change, the opposition doesn't have the same kind of elbow space. The PPP government has taken the wind out of the sail of the opposition. Ogunsi open me mouth, charge. I don't know if the charge was correct yet. They're using the enormous power of the state. And there are no checks and balances on them. The Americans have made some noises. Yes, you all should have power sharing, but they're not prepared to enforce it. So that checks and balances gone. The business sector, normally it's a check, that's gone because they are making money. They're accumulating wealth. People want to know why some of these Portuguese personalities have come out to defend the PPP. After the YAR party broke up, a lot of the Portuguese went over to the PNC, not the PPP. I'm talking about the Portuguese elite. Why are they now defending the PPP? It's wealth. In ethnic studies, we call groups like the Portuguese and the Chinese middlemen. They don't seek to lead the politics, but they use their wealth to influence the politics so that they can make more money. They're called middlemen in ethnic studies. Portuguese are not interested in becoming president. They're interested in accumulating wealth. And they're prepared to defend whichever party is going to help them to accumulate wealth. They didn't like the PPP. They were communists. But all of a sudden, they're supporting the PPP. It's wealth, oil wealth, stupid. And you hear those people tell us, Kit Nascimento and them telling us that we must get rid of African Guyanese and we must become Guyanese, and some of us fall for that nonsense. The Portuguese didn't suffer in Guyana. They came and they weren't suited to the plantation, and they were given affirmative action into the business sector. Guyana did not wrong the Portuguese, except they came as indentured laborers. Guyana has done wrong to Africans. And to tell us not to embrace our Africanness is to tell us to forget about the wrongs that have been done to us. Guyana's wronged the Indians to some extent. And to tell Indian people, forget about Indian Guyanese and be Guyanese. Groups like the Portuguese and the Chinese can do that because Guyana's not wrong them. So Guyana becomes this mask. We Africans and Indians and Amerindians, we have to be both Guyanese and hyphenated Guyanese. We have to be both. So they advise Orphan to come up with this one Guyana nonsense. One Guyana for money? No. One Guyana for political power? No. And those are the things that matter in a country: political power and economic power. And one Guyana does not include those things. So our condition today, sisters and brothers, is heavily influenced by that regime change. It means that we can't do politics in the normal way because our country is not a normal place. We have to talk about boots on the ground, but we have to do it differently. Nothing wrong with black people. You know, we think that, oh, they're in Guyana taking all the blows and they ain't doing nothing. If anybody, any group writes the primer on protest and boots on the ground is black people. And if they're not putting their boots on the ground today, we have to examine why. We have to mobilize differently. You see, there is a reason why Jack Dio and them frighten this thing that we on here every night. Because it is this kind of mobilization they're afraid of. A mobilization that gives our people confidence and gives our people the truth, that empower our people. Because an empowered people, the boots on the ground will be more effective. The PPP is deathly afraid of this. They will ban it tomorrow. We have to find new and creative ways of fighting back. The old ways don't work when there is regime change. Exxon and the Americans don't want an atmosphere that threatens their investment. The PPP will do anything to hold on to power. Anything, anything. And they will push the Americans' button and see how far they will be allowed to go. They're going into black communities and trying to buy people and things. It's deliberate. And it arises from a particular thinking. So there we are, sisters and brothers. The struggle before us is enormous. GCOM is not going to give us a clean voters list. I think Aubrey Norton said that the other day there, yesterday or the day before, that GCOM cannot deliver free and fair election. They can't. They can't. How are we going to get free and fair elections then? If GCOM can't deliver it, it means that we have to have a political solution. This is not just about election. We are not in a normal country. Indians are angry that the PPP doesn't name the day Indian Arrival Day, but you don't see them going on the streets and picketing the government and so on. No, 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 no. Oh no. The government is sticking it to us, but we are not going out there to picket them. It's Friday. It's Black Matters. And I hope we have cleared a little bit of debris so that you all know what time of day it is. I'm going to be on Sunday night at 7 o'clock. Podcast. We're going to be discussing with Professor Clive Thomas, oil and gas. So see you all on Sunday night, same time, same place, 7 o'clock on Sunday night. Enjoy your Saturday.
If you hear that, black is beautiful. Santa Claus.
Black is beautiful.
It's a texture. Lift your head like me. You got to wear your clothes.